Welcome back to A.R.T's Real Repairs for Real Customers. We're going to do some furniture repairs today. I've had a couple of texts over the last couple of months asking about expanding their market from automotive into other markets. And I'm not a marketing guy, but on this channel we have shown features of various markets, so hopefully there's something in here for everyone to get a taste of what's expected and what's available out there. But when it comes to marketing, it seems to me that it's possible in this ever-changing world that you could go to school for marketing, and by the time you're graduated, you step out into a world that's much different than you prepared for. So it seems to make sense to develop as many skills as possible so that when opportunities arise, you can step right in and take advantage of that. It could be that there is a repair that you think is going to require a lot of extra time and energy and perhaps a little bit more investment, like a one-off repair, and you say, well, I don't want to get involved in that. But even the one-off could teach you something, and it could open up new doors, new opportunities. So don't discredit the value of doing a one-off kind of repair. But this repair today, we're going to look at this one with a view to comparing similarities between the furniture repair and automotive repair, and also the vast difference between much of the furniture repair that we have today and automotive. We'd better get to work. Without the casters, our chair is a bit tipsy, so we're going to make something to stabilize it. And it's always good to have some scrap lumber lying around just for such occasions. So we ought to give it some sort of a name, don't you think? Let's call it the on-tableizer, the on-table stabilizer. And yes, that is really dumb. Now, we didn't plan on doing much with the backrest on this seat, but we're going to clean it anyway, and we'll get a good view of the original color there. You saw the arms in our preview picture. We're going to replace the leather on the arms, and then on the seat bottom, where it's worn, we're going to try to repair that. So for the prep, we need a good degreaser and a scuff pad to get the accumulated soil out of there, give it a little bit of dwell time, and then we'll follow up with our alcohol prep. Another consideration for this chair in particular is that one of these arms has just recently been reattached and the wood has been refinished in those areas. So we're going to have to be very careful not to disturb this new finish. Now, in considering the color, we could describe this chair as a green chair. But from experience, we know that our green pigment is very strong. The chair, rather, is mostly brown, but leaning toward the green. Experience tells us if we start with the green, we can hardly diminish the intensity of the green to achieve our target color. So we can make a plan then to start with brown, add a little bit of green cautiously at first, and since both of these pigments are very dark, we could add a little bit of white at first to lighten the value. Let's do it. So this is the 140 brown, dark brown, the 175 green, and a little bit of 101 white. Our pigments represent 20% of our total, so the other 80% is the clear base or the binder of your choice. As a word of caution, always do this in your mixing station, never over top of the actual furniture. You would have to be a highly skilled professional to be able to make the kind of messes that I'm capable of making and still survive. Obviously, we were shy on the green, but I'm rather gun-shy about the strength of this green pigment. I'd rather take a couple of steps adding green than to overdo it. And along the way, a little bit of white for value, a twofer. I think at this point I want to do a wipe-on test and see what it looks like dried down. Okay, so that's obviously dark. Maybe if I wiped it a little lighter, in a wider area, let's see if it's still the same darkness. And yes, it is. So at this point, I have more brown than green, so we need to up the green a little bit, and we're dark for value. So again, we're going to hit it with a few drops of white. So it's obvious I'm really concerned about adding the green and the white incrementally so that I don't overshoot this, which is really saying something because I usually overshoot it. Let's spread this one out a bit more as well. See what we get. Obviously, all of our adjustments have been contributing in a positive way. I'm close enough now to save this back. We can use this color as our guide coat color and maybe even as our first sprayed on color, and then we can see positively what our final adjustment will be at that time. We have something to work with now though. So let's get busy with the repair process. Again, we're going to be protective of our wood finish. Tape sometimes can pull some clear off of the wood, but the company that did the wood restoring can easily touch that up, no problems. Now, in our previous video, we showed the advisability of using the sand-away product to remove the existing finish. And where we have all of these cracks in the leather, this is what I want to do. However, we mentioned that 100 grit was the way to go, and you see me using 220 here. This is exploratory. I want to see, for this particular leather, how 220 works. And it's obviously not working well enough to suit me, but I did want to do a rather cautious test at first. So this is really proving the point of our previous video that typically working with 220, trying to get the finish all the way off of there, is really a waste of time. But it's also good that you can see it here for yourself. Now we're going to switch to the 100 grit and get the real job done. And I can really feel it cutting. It's making a huge difference. There's no doubt about it. We're getting down to the root cause of our problem with the leather, fully exposing everything that needs repaired. A bit of acetone now profusely on here to clean up the residue and also to dry out the immediate surface. And isn't it interesting how the leather underneath looks green and the finish looks brown? Now that the surface is dry and a little bit rough, we're just going to smooth it down with some 220 grit. Also, we have a very good look at our damage and can now make a plan of repair. Now that the finish is off, we have a clear path to put some PVA glue down into each one of these separations. Our friend Gary will be happy that we're doing this. He really likes the flexibility of the PVA. And this adhesive is used primarily in a fiber-to-fiber configuration, meaning that it's not that strong all by itself, but it does well adhering one fiber to another. And for that reason, we're going to force this adhesive down into these exposed leather fibers. So you can see that if we had not sanded off all of the finish, we'd be limited in just a thin line where we could put this adhesive. But now that the finish is off in a wider area, the adhesive extends beyond the original line and actually creates roots down into the surrounding leather fibers. So our repair ends up having a much wider grip into the seat. I do like to use alcohol to feather the edges and also to remove any heavy buildup of adhesive, so I have a thin layer at a time to dry and cure. And as the first application has dried and shrunk a bit, we're going again. There is a deeper recess here in the shape of an X, so I need some filler. Use any air dry filler you have at your discretion. I am putting some additives into my PVA glue, creating a filler but still with the flexibility of the PVA. And A.R.T. did a test of this some time ago. Pull it apart. Okay, we're going to do a tensile strength test.
I can't pull it apart.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
God, I can't. I don't have the strength.
Keep going.
No.
I make it fresh for each job because it dries out too quickly if I try to store it. First, I just want to fill in some of the deeper areas. Again, feel free to use whatever filler you are fond of that works well for you. As with any of the air dry fillers, however, we don't want to do any sanding. It's too easy to sand up the edge and roll any flexible air dry filler. And when you do that, it takes so long to refill that divot. You could go back and create yourself another hour's worth of work. So my recommendation is for any air dry filler of your choice, find out which chemical works best to feather that before it's cured, therefore eliminating the need to sand. In this case, the alcohol does fine for the feathering. You might find in your instance, your particular application, that acetone might work well. You might even find that just using a cloth with the finished color will feather enough. In fact, quite often we use the filler and the color together to feather everything. That deep spot might be more obvious to you now. We're going to dry this down and then put a second application in that deep spot where X marks the spot. And this is where you let whatever solvent you're using do the work. Don't press too hard. There were some other spots too. Over here on this side of the seat, we're not going to spend a lot of time there. It's the same thing as we did on the front. And the deeper areas will get one more application. This is all I'm going to do now on our first day of repairing, and this is one of the major differences between automotive and furniture. For furniture, we might need extra flexibility, and because of that, we need a longer cure time for our slower drying products. We're going to leave this overnight and address the rest of it tomorrow. It's not that some furniture repairs have to take more time than automotive, but many do. And here's a tip. Take the top off your glue container and rinse it out between uses. All right, so with everything nicely cured, I'm going to come back and tack everything up with my alcohol. This will make it sticky and it'll prepare it for a little bit of guide coat color so we can see how well we've progressed so far. I'm pretty happy with our progress. Of course, the guide coat shows up areas that we could touch up yet again. And we fully expected that because we're putting our filler in thin layers, that we'd have to make multiple applications. I should mention here that in the past we've stated that it's not a good idea to use the PVA glue on the surface. It's more for impregnating within the leather fibers. And the reason for that is layers on the surface would tend to roll off. But I've been experimenting with some fillers, which also give it better adhesion. And so this is one of the applications where we feel confident in using our experimental product. Of course, here's a final guide coat color. Well, we hope it's a final guide coat color. So I'm going to leave that right there until such time as we take care of these arms here. When I replace the arms, I'll spray that leather. Then we'll spray the seat bottom with our adjusted color. The staple pullers seem to work pretty good for taking out these furniture nails. We'll just show a couple of those. So the original leather is 3/64, and I have some 3/64 leather left over. So I've marked the original pieces for orientation, and I'm cutting out enough material to dye. First of all, though, we'll do a little sample dyeing. The sprayed sample is too shiny, so we'll dull that down and we'll add just a little bit of green again. So that sprayed coat really tells the tale on the color much better than dabbing it on. But that's not going to stop us from using our original color as a guide coat, certainly. Changing color usually requires 3 passes. Here, because the value of our target color and the value of our leather were very close, 2 coats is going to be sufficient. So because we've added some flattener to our color, the base coat color is now more satin. And now when we put on our satin clear, it will cover very easily and more uniformly. And of course, our clear contains cross-linker and slip additive. Slip additive so that you slide off the seat instead of abrading the finish. And here is something that surprised me. In the sample, without the clear, we can write on the sample with the leather pen. But the leather with the clear coat with the slip additive, we can't write on it at all. Isn't that interesting? That's the first time I've experienced that. Well, that shows the value of the slip additive in protecting the leather. So we had to resort to a chalk line this time. Now I'm using a few staples just to situate my leather in the right position and hold it there so that we can get our furniture nails in. The main thing here for me is to be very careful of the wood that's just been refinished as well. And I'm copying the original folds on the front. I did notice one imperfection in the backrest. We're not going to get too excited about it, but I will put a little bit of filler in there. That way there won't be any squawks when we finish it up. Here I'm just doing a very light sanding to get all the nibs off to make sure we have a very smooth finish when it comes time to spraying our color. Imagine if you finished the seat totally and delivered it with a little nib on the surface, and then the first time somebody used it, the nib came off and revealed a lack of color under it. So always do a light sanding with 400 or 600 before going with your color. If anything is going to come off, let's get it off now. As it turns out, I didn't have that top repair in frame, but it's just a little blend and a little drying. Now I'm doing some sanding with 1000 grit just to give that extra smooth finish, to make sure we don't have any nibs in the surface whatsoever, because I have one more spray coat of color and then my clear coat. So here goes the color now. This coating then would be what we'd call an overall for a uniform finish. And now for that same satin clear with the cross-linker and the slip additive. And no wood finish was harmed in the process of our leather restoration. Yes, I was very happy with the flexibility and with the smooth surface. That's the first thing the customer is going to feel right there. And let's just say a little bit more about furniture restoration. I really like the way that turned out. Now, we were talking about some differences between automotive repairs and furniture repairs. And in this case, this kind of furniture is what we call heirloom furniture. And just consider what was spent on this chair. The customer was quoted for the wood repairs and for the leather together $1,345. Now you might wonder, can't you buy a new chair for that? Absolutely. But that's the thing about heirloom furniture. This furniture means something to someone. It's somebody in the family that you want to remember their legacy. Heirloom furniture is a museum piece, and who knows, it might end up in a museum. So that's the kind of quality work that we're expecting. And as you could see, we took the time to remove the finish so that we could anchor our repair into the surrounding leather fibers. It's not coming loose. And we got so much flexibility and durability out of this approach. So it's worth the extra time and effort when you see what a beautiful job that ends up being. Thank you for your interest in quality workmanship, and we hope to have more on this channel soon. Thanks for watching.